I'm going to go ahead and hit the recording button so we can capture this later. Like I said, we're so glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and share a really nifty little PowerPoint deck just to help everybody as they come in make sure that they know that they've joined us successfully or in the right place. So I'm Angie Taylor. I'm ATD Nebraska's Director of Virtual Events, and so we're glad to have you here today. If you would be willing, we would be so grateful if you'd introduce yourself to one another here in chat. So if you feel comfortable putting in your name, your role, and then, if your name doesn't match your screen name, that would be great. Your role and your organization, if whatever you'd like to share to help give one another just a chance for networking and getting to see other friendly faces, as well as for Russ, who's our presenter today. So thank you for joining us. We're going to get started here soon. The next item of business, we just have these slides to share with you. So today we're going to be having Russ Genzmer's expertise kind of filling all of our buckets with some really remarkable ideas about how to help develop teams with great intentionality. And I've kind of had a sneak peek, and I know that we're all in for a treat. On the slide now, it's just mentioning our updated membership options. Just as a courtesy reminder, ATD Nebraska chose, with the blessings of our membership, to move to a revised membership plan. And so we're going with what's called an all-inclusive plan that includes the monthly standard events. And then there will be some additional events that fall outside the all-inclusive price point, but we just want to make sure everybody is aware of the changes. And we think it's going to be a great value for you. And then if your company helps sponsor you, it'll be just a lot smoother and easier. So check out the member benefits that ATD offers. We know that it's kind of like a Library of Congress with really wonderful resources available to you. Sometimes you don't know what to check out, so make good use of all the tools that are available to you. Our next upcoming event, virtually to be held, of course, by Zoom, is with Jeannie Fraser, and it's going to be a wonderful session, and that is kind of an extra on top professional development series piece, so be sure to visit atdnebraska.org for more information. So with that said, we are a couple minutes after the hour. If you've just joined us, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please do take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat pane, just so we can all introduce one another. Not introduce one another, just have an introduction to one another. And so with that said here, we're going to go ahead and get started. Because Russ will be sharing slides with us today, I would just encourage you briefly how to set up your screen for the best user experience today. So in your Zoom window, you will see a toolbar, and if you wiggle your mouse, it'll reappear for you. At the end of the toolbar is a View Options button. And so I recommend that you click View Options and then choose side-by-side mode. And what that does is it'll just split your screen, and then his presentation will be on one side, and what it'll allow you to do is drag the bar between the two sides, left or right, to resize for your best viewability on your monitor. And then once you have that set up, in the upper right corner, there's a view button that will appear in the top right of the Zoom window. And it's not on the toolbar, it's actually a button in the upper right corner that says view. And then I would recommend side-by-side speaker mode. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, we are so glad to welcome today's speaker, Russ Genzmer. And I will just share with you a little bit about his bio. Russ Genzmer of Genzmer Consulting is with us today to discuss developing self-managed teams for the 21st century. Russ has 48 years of management experience in business, and he'll be discussing with us how developing self-managed teams can unlock the power of those teams, which will help innovatively move our businesses, large or small, through the challenges of the 21st century. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my screen share. Russ, welcome. We're so glad that you're here today as we get started. If you have questions as we go through the day, please know that I'm here to support you both technologically and to facilitate our conversation. So if you have questions as we go through, put them them in chat. If needed, I may hop in and ask Russ a question, but in general, our plan will be to gather your questions and then we'll pose them, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So with that, Russ, welcome. Thank you for being here, and I turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Angie. Can you hear me all right?
Sounds
All
wonderful,
right.
and your screen share looks great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Great. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I want to thank Angie and I want to thank Debbie and Sunny and everybody at ATD Nebraska chapter for giving me a few minutes to share with you today a very important topic. Now, first of all, a spoiler alert. ATD, this isn't going to be a session where I'll be discussing tips, tools, and techniques in developing your learning and teaching skills. It'll actually be on a topic that I'm hoping that learning and developing professionals will begin to think about as we move forward. Now, that important topic is developing self-managed teams. And when I say for the 21st century, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the health crisis we're going through right now. Now, about mid-March is when we business people that know everything came up with a term called the new normal. In other words, when we get through this health crisis, which we will, we'll not be in the old normal, we'll be in the new normal. And I've been working with a number of companies over the last 10 months, as well as several think tanks from the East Coast to discuss what's going to be this new normal. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the new normal in regards to leading, managing, and supervising people, there's going to be many downside pressures on leaders and managers and supervisors that they hadn't compensated for, or maybe even have skills in facing them when we get into the new normal. So the reason why I want to talk about self-managed teams is there's going to be all of this extra stuff that leaders and managers are going to have to do in this new normal. Well, they already have lots of stuff to do. So what's a potential solution? A potential solution is to develop self-managed teams, not where they can manage all of themselves, but a good deal of it, thus freeing up some time and some space on those leaders and managers as they navigate through this new normal. So we're going to be talking about developing self-managed teams, okay? Now, first of all, though, before we get into that, I want to kind of lay some groundwork on what I perceive as leadership foundational pillars. In other words, the house of leadership that Russ believes in is held up by three pillars. The first pillar is influential leadership, not powerful leadership. Powerful leadership was in the 20th century. This is the 21st century. We need to start developing our leadership into an influential leadership style. The second pillar that holds up this house of leadership is called relationships and connections. Only again, different than in the past, these influential leaders need to develop deep relationships and connections with their staff, their peers, and everybody else. The third pillar is the meat of what we're going to be discussing today, which is developing self-managed teams. Influential leaders, developing relationships and connections, then developing self-managed teams. That's where your company sits on. Now, there's dozens of other leadership topics that I focus on in my business, but they all are supported by these three basic pillars. Now, let's sprinkle some reality dust on here. When I say where possible here, let's use some companies as an example. Some large companies, Union Pacific, Omaha World Herald, Lincoln Journal, maybe someday Genzmer Consultant with 5,000 employees. I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay. These companies have dozens of departments and they have dozens of teams. I mean, much as I'd love all the teams in all the businesses to become self-managed, that's not necessarily even appropriate in some cases. Some of your teams may be small and have smaller tasks to do on a individual daily basis. They don't necessarily need to be developed into a self-managed team, but those teams that are a little larger and have more mature and learned and experienced employees, those are the ones we want to focus on, because developing those teams into self-managed teams is going to power the company forward in the 21st century. So I'm not here today to say all of you need to develop all of your teams into self-managed teams. It's usually a selective basis. So now, there's a couple of absolutes I want to mention at first. One of the absolutes is that self-managed teams are developed and led by influential leaders, not powerful leaders. I know this is a big, this is a tough love lesson I give companies that want to have me come in and develop self-managed teams. I'll say, well, I need to do an assessment on your leadership. If their leadership is the old, it's my way and the highway, orders, edicts, work-life balance, who cares? That's not going to work. Companies that want good, solid, self-managed teams have to be led by influential leaders. So that's one sort of stake in the ground. The other absolute is that good leaders will not work themselves out of a job. A lot of times when a company calls me up and says, Russ, can you come in and help us develop self-managed teams? When I arrive, the management base views me with a little intrepidation because just the very term self-managed teams. In fact, I've had a number of them say, so you're here to help work me out of a job. No, that's not true. In fact, just the opposite. Good leaders do not work themselves out of a job by developing self-managed teams. Quite the contrary. When I come in and help them, I build influential leadership in them, which then increases their value. Yes, it changes their role, but they're still a manager, but it increases their value and their positive impact in the company. All right. Now, this is something that I've believed in for years. There's a difference between building a team and developing a team. Okay. Now, a lot of times, again, when I come into a company, they say, who cares? I don't care whether you build or develop our teams. I just want a smooth running team. Well, you do need to consider the difference between building a team and developing a team. In fact, I would ask those of you out there, how many of you work for companies that have team building exercises every once in a while? If you do, I'm fine with team building exercises as long as the expectation is properly managed. Too many leaders and managers feel like, oh, I'll schedule monthly luncheons. I'll have bowling outings, golf outings. We'll gather in the conference room all afternoon and put Legos together and see who are the natural leaders that rise to the top. Okay, that's team building exercises. I'd be careful about thinking that after a couple of lunches and a couple of bowling outings that you have actually developed a team that can face the challenges of big projects, small projects, conflict, etc. That calls for developing a team. And developing a team is a painstakingly patient process of success after success, failure after failure, speed bumps, potholes. All of those things take time to truly develop a team. In fact, I compare it to building a house. When you build a house, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to building that house. Beginning, middle, and an end. But you develop it into a home. Why? Well, because the end of the building of the house is when you start to develop it into a home. Why? Because we see here, there's lights on, which means now people have moved in. They're celebrating birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Okay, you can see that there's shrubbery, landscaping, trees, rocks, whatever. Okay, they're developing it into a home over time. Pretty soon they're going to paint a room a different color, like my wife does, almost every room, okay? They're going to add more trees. They're going to add more shrubbery. They're going to add another third garage for that Corvette I want to buy someday. Can you hear that? Okay. There is a similarity between building a house and developing a house. They both have a start point. The dissimilarity is there's an end point to building the house. There is no end point to developing that house. You can have that house for 20 years and you will still be adding stuff to it. It's the same way with teams. When you build a team through some finite beginning, middle, and an end, bowling outing, golf outing, picnic on the patio, whatever, all right? But developing a team, there is no end. Your very ATD chapter is synonymous with that. You're constantly learning new things, new tools, new training aids. Why? Because your business model is changing, your clientele is changing. That home that you call a business is always changing. There's no end to it. So there's no end to your teams. So instead of building, okay, that's all right, but you need to think in terms of developing, which again takes a lot of patience. Now, in terms of developing, there's 4 generally acknowledged stages that you need to move a team through to develop them into a top performing team. The first stage is called the forming stage. That's your responsibility as a leader or manager. Forming. Now, please don't just rush out and put people on that team. That's usually what happens, all right? What you want to do first is find out, what is this team supposed to do? What's the nature of the project? What are the skills that are needed to do this project? And here's another thing that isn't considered a lot. What's the behavior and the personality needed for the team to do this project? Once you have all that together, now you go pick and choose your employees to put on that project. Yes, I realize some of you have teams that are pretty small, 5, 6, 7 people, so you don't have, like 302 I had. You can have some of those. No, you can't. I realize that you have smaller teams, but at least you need to consider what you've got in terms of personnel and what you need on that project, so that you're aware of the gap should that cause any problems in the project. So forming is the first stage. Once you form the team, the next stage you move them through is the storming stage. Now, the reason why we call it the storming stage is because you may be putting people on a project that they know each other, they're in the business, but they've never worked for days, weeks, or months on a project together. They need to get used to each other. So we call it the storming stage. They need to understand what trips each other's trigger, what aggravates them, irritates them, makes them happy. Okay. There's a chance then during this get to know each other period that there may be conflict. Okay. That's why we call it the storming stage. Now, there's 2 types of conflict, good and bad. How do you like that for studious research? Good and bad. Okay, the good type of conflict is when you have team members that have professional disagreement. When that happens, let it happen. Don't smother it like a lot of leaders I've been around. Let it happen, because it's their way of getting used to each other. Now, if it's bad, that's when it gets personal. Backbiting, backstabbing, those types of things, that's when you need to step in and take care of it. But if it's always professional disagreement, let it happen, okay? Now, the next stage, after you've formed them, after you've stormed them, so to speak, then the next stage you move them to is the norming stage. Now, the reason it's called the norming stage is because now they're starting to do work. Good, average, solid work. That's why we call it the norming stage. Now, after they've matured in this norming stage, then they move to, or you move them to the final stage, which is the performing stage, okay? The performing stage is different than the norming stage in that the team is clicking on all 8 cylinders. They are a well-oiled team. They're even exceeding expectations, okay? It doesn't mean that they don't still have some conflict, but most of the major conflict was taken care of back in the storming stage, okay? They are a top-performing, a well-performing team. Now, I can tell you right now, whenever I do a live one of these, I'll always ask for a show of hands, or I'll ask for the feedback. If you're a leader or manager, which one of these 4 stages is the most challenging to you as you march your team through? Okay, so I'll give you 5 or 10 seconds or so. If you were a leader or manager, which of these 4 stages do you think would be the most challenging for you? In fact, Angie, if they get in the chat room, can you give me any feedback?
Sure. So if you guys want to type in 1, 2, 3, or 4, if you want to help vote that way and put it in chat, we'll have 1 be forming, 2 storming, 3 norming, and 4 performing. Let's see which one is the hardest. Ooh, we see a couple 2s there. Few 2s. It doesn't look like everybody's had a chance to respond quite yet. A 4. All right, a performing. All right. So we have 3 2s and a 4. Should we turn it back over to you, Russ? Ooh, a 4 can be tricky as well, Jess said.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
I'm
It
sorry.
looked like you froze for just a second.
Yes, I apologize. It's okay. So it seems like we've had some storming, because that's normal. Okay. No leader or manager no matter how good, wants to get up every morning and go, boy, I hope I go into the teeth of a shark or something. Actually, the most challenging is the performing stage. Now, I know what some of you are saying. Now, wait a minute. The performing stage, Russ, that's when you said it's clicking on all 8 cylinders. It's a well-oiled machine. It's exceeding expectations. How can that be the most challenging to me as a leader? Have you ever heard of that statement, no good deed goes unpunished? The good deed is that you've developed a top performing team. The punishment is you're going to get more and more, probably high pressure, high value targets to work for each and every quarter or year. All right. Now, and you want that though. You want that as a leader of a top performing team, and you want the top performing team to want that. Okay. If they were assigned 10 projects in 2020 and got 15 done, they exceeded expectations. Okay. Guess what's going to happen in 2021? They're going to get assigned 20, and they want that. Okay. But here's where the challenge is for you. They're going to come back to you and say, okay, if you want us to do more projects, we need better tools. We need better training. And guess what that means to you? More money, more money, more money. You're going to have to, I don't know how many of you are involved in corporate budget cycles, but I've been involved in 12 billion of them. And I would much rather have my fingernails pulled out with a pair of pliers than go through another budget cycle. Okay. I tell you, I feel like a little street urchin begging for money. And I was a big officer. But that's going to be the challenge for you, because guess what's going to happen in 2022? Going to be more high target projects. The team's going to come back to you, and they should be able to. More money, more tools, more training. Okay. That's why it's a challenge for you. Okay. Now, now, let's talk about influential leaders first before we talk about self-managed teams, because remember, self-managed teams are developed by influential leaders. I was part of a study a year or so ago, 2,000 employees. We interviewed 2,000 employees coast to coast, border to border, and asked them, what kind of boss or manager do you want moving forward in the 21st century? 5% of them still want the old-fashioned task-driven manager. They come in to a Chris or to an Angie or a Debbie, and they say, here's what you do today, here's what you do tomorrow. 13% want the traditional authoritarian. In other words, they're the boss that it's my way or the highway. They assign you work, tell you how you should do it, when you should do it, how you should do it. 82% of the staff in this country now want a people-centered leader or manager, which is an influential leader. Now, some things about an influential leader: they coach, mentor, develop, and challenge. Coach, mentor, develop, and challenge. They don't order, command, and edicts and or else, and you've got to do this and come in late. Okay. The second thing is they look for growth every day for every one of their employees, even if it's small growth. All right. And no, it can't be every day, but at least they strive for that. And the last one is particularly appealing to me because, as you can tell by my hair, I am old, but I am not old fashioned. So, okay. Influential leadership has been found to appeal to the 4 basic generations that are still in corporate America or business America today. Those 4 generations are the baby boomers, such as myself. I'm sort of a crossover from the baby boomer to the radio generation. Then you've got your Generation X, and then you've got the millennials, Generation Y, and then you have, coming to a team near you, Generation Z coming at you. All 4 generations actually want influential leadership, even the older generation. Why? Because there is a single thing that is common across all generations. Yes, we have our differences, okay? But there is one thing that is common across all 4 generations. They want to be valued. That doesn't happen with the task-driven manager. That doesn't happen with the traditional authoritarian. It happens with influential leaders that are people-centered. Now, when I come into a company that wants me to develop or help them develop influential leaders, I'll get 20% into the project, and all of a sudden somebody will come, the CEO will come running into my office, and they'll say, wait a minute, Russ, I forgot. How are we going to tell when we've got influential leaders? How are we going to tell that? And I said, don't worry, I've got a 15-point grading system here, okay? But there is one thing that always tells me whether or not a leader is moving to an influential leader or not. And that one thing is this: you are there even when you're not there. You are there even when you're not there. Your influence is. Okay, and I get just so you know, Angie, I'm getting an internet connection. You say, okay, let's hope we stay on it.
So far, you're here. You're doing okay so far.
Okay, all right. Okay, the leader can be on a 5-day business trip or a 10-day vacation. They may be gone physically, but they are still there because they have such an influence. That team knows how to operate. They know how to think. They've got a culture they operate under, all because of influential leaders. Now let's stay with influential leaders for a minute. Minimum requirements to be an influential leader. Number 1, and these are not necessarily in priority, but the first one up here: high degree of self-confidence. High degree of self-confidence, not cockiness, but you do need to have a little corporate swagger, okay? Understand your role. Understand clearly what an influential leader is. The third one, I love this one because especially when I deal with CEOs and executives, they always think that since they know so much, they're the ones that need to talk all the time. No, as you move up the ladder, you actually need to listen more and talk less. Why? Where is the vibrance and the success of a company? It's not in the third floor where we are. And I can say that because I was an executive up there. It's at the cash register, the customer service counter, and the floor. That's where things are happening. And when leaders shut themselves off from that, yeah, they get their quarterly reports and weekly reports, but that's post activity. Great influential leaders get out among the troops on a daily, weekly basis and see what's happening. And then the last one, if you want to be an influential leader, your team has to trust you impeccably 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, period, period, period. Every time I mention this especially to upper management, they'll always say, now, wait a minute, Russ, we're only human. Sometimes we make mistakes. Making mistakes is fine. Breaking your trust is not fine, period, period. Because when we get to this self-managed piece, you're going to find out you're going to be dumping a lot of stuff to that team. That team better understand and trust you. So you need to have that. Now, but most of all, for an influential leader, the depth of the relationship and connection, remember I mentioned that at the very start, one of those pillars, the depth of that relationship and connection that you develop with that team, that determines the breadth of your influence. And here's a little sidebar tip for any of you that want to march your way up the corporate ladder. You want that breadth of influence to be as wide as possible, even outside your team. That's how you get noticed. But you get noticed by having a connection and a relationship, high degree of self-confidence, understand your role, listen more than you talk. Okay? Now, one last thing on the influential leadership. The key attributes of them. Servant leadership bias. I'm sorry, but I am a devout disciple of servant leadership bias. Now, I've got lots of books over here. I got 211 page, 343 page. Okay, I can sum up servant leadership in one phrase. I serve you. I serve you. What do you need? What tools do you need? What training do you need? My job is to clear the runway so that my team can take off and do that project. The second thing, transition power to the team. Now we're getting into the meat of things. An influential leader that wants to develop a self-managed team needs to transition power to that team. What power are we talking about? I'll give you 4 categories. As an influential leader, to develop a self-managed team, you need to start transitioning more accountability, more responsibility, more decision-making, and more risk management from you to the team. The next one, acceptable levels of power. That's connected to the transition. When you transition this stuff, you've got to determine what levels do I want to transition to my team and what levels of those 4 categories do I want to retain, because I'm still the leader. I'm still ultimately accountable for that person or that team. The next one, know your tipping point. Let's just say that you've got a self-managed team and it's clicking. It's a year old. It's going, but they're suddenly faced with a butt-kicking project, high risk, high value target, and they're having problems, big problems. You need to know the tipping point. That is the point at which you determine, should I jump in, help the team, do some heavy lifting, get the project going? You need to know that tipping point, or do I stand back? Okay, it's like your children as they grow up. You pick them up at 2 years old when they skin their knee, but about 5 or 6, you got to do what Peyton Manning says, rub some dirt on it, Joey. Okay. You got to know the tipping point. And if you do get in and do some heavy lifting to get that project going, you better get the heck back out when it's done. Otherwise, you're going to send that team back to a traditional managed team. And then purpose and significance. I want to spend a few minutes on this because this, to me, is a big part of my heart and soul. Okay. Purpose and significance. I believe more importance should be attached to those 2 things than an employee's skills, job duties, and responsibilities, period. Purpose and significance. What are they? Purpose is not what the employee does. Purpose is why they are there. Why they are there. And the significance part is how important that why is. You've got to make your employees understand why they are there. Let me just give you an example, all right? Let's say we've got a car assembly line, okay? assembly line. And the first people are the ones that put the chassis on it, and then they put the dash on it, and it goes a little farther. They put the engine in it. The people clear at the end, they're the ones that put the lug nuts on the wheels. Wow, that's real important. Put lug nuts on wheels, put lug nuts on wheels. Here comes another car, put lug nuts on wheels, put lug nuts on wheels. If you've got an influential leader, that influential leader needs to go to that person and say, what you do is put lug nuts on wheels. Why you are doing it, you're part of a team that's going to build a vacation vehicle for a family sooner or later when they buy this vehicle. That's why you're here. You're not here to put lug nuts on wheels. You're here to be a part of building this vacation vehicle. And as far as the importance of it, the significance of it, if that family takes a vacation through the Rocky Mountains at 65 or 70 miles an hour with little Bobby and Sissy in the back seat, my God, those lug nuts better be on real good. The moral of this is there is no insignificant job anywhere, period. And that's what influential leaders bring out in people. There is no insignificant job. Okay, last thing on influential leaders before we actually get into the self-managed teams. Here we have a team meeting called by an influential leader. Okay, I love this. This has so many concepts in it that I love. Okay, this is a team meeting and there is a leader there. Okay, there is a leader there and there's a project. You can see that in the middle. It's an almost completed blue puzzle. That's the project. It's missing one piece. Now, let me ask you something. Who's the leader in this team? Who's the leader in this team? By color. Just
since we're all muted, would you like us to, and we're a small group, so I think we could unmute ourselves and talk about it if you would like, or they could answer in chat, however you would prefer. Yeah,
that would be great.
All right, so unmute. Let's see.
Red.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm assuming the leader is in red.
Okay, we got a red. Anybody else? Let me give you a clue. Color. There's the project. Color. Who's the leader? Who's got the missing piece?
Blue.
Blue. Now, in the old days, with a powerful leader, that person, that man or woman who is the leader, and I love it because it's a round table. I never, in the 29 years, the last 29 years of my career, I never sat at the head table during a meeting. I don't need a cap or a t-shirt that says I'm the big dog. I love this round table. Why? Because this influential leader says you all have equal share in solving this problem. We need to complete this project. Somebody has the missing piece. In the 20th century, it'd be the blue person, okay? But this blue person is an influential leader, and I love this. Influential leaders live by 4 important words. What do you think? And that's what he or she is saying around that table. That influential leader says, you know what, I got the missing piece, but you know what? The red person or the green person or I don't even know, the fuchsia, is that a color? The fuchsia person might have the missing piece, but you'll never know that back in the 20th century because he just forces the piece or she just forces the piece in there. Influential leaders say, hey, what do y'all think? And guess what? The green person has the missing piece. Who cares if it's not the right color? It is the missing piece. The only way you're going to find that out is if you have what do you think mentality, which comes from influential leadership. I love this diagram. It just has so many stories in it. Okay. All right. Let's get into self-managed teams. First of all, why? Why have a self-managed team? Because I'm a leader and manager. I like power. I like my fiefdom. I like my peeps. God, I hate that term. First of all, team speed. If you have a self-managed team, the speed of that team, you ever see, you know what a funnel looks like? It's got a big mouth and then it comes down and constricted into a throat. Traditional teams, a lot of times, everything's got to go through the leader. So the speed of that, let's just use a team of 10. The speed of that team is the speed of 1 because everything's got to go through you. But in a self-managed team, picture that funnel as having no neck. It's just straight down. Team speed increases with self-managed teams because they don't need to run everything through you. The other thing, feedback is more accurate and timely to you from them, okay? Because there's no miscommunication, no confusion. Also, there's much more pride in workmanship. Why? Because a self-managed team owns that project, okay? Yes, you as the leader and manager own the ultimate accountability, but they have more ownership than they ever did before. Innovation and creativity increases. Why? Because I'm not going to think up everything new. You are. That's one of those things you establish. That's part of that transition. I'm transitioning the creativity to you because you got 10 people on there. Why are you thinking up everything? Okay. Assess, decide, action, results, and growth. All right. I don't know. There's a term out there in business called straight through processing. Okay. Straight through processing. And I've helped a number of companies get to straight through processing. When a customer orders something, that's the beginning. Until they get it, they got to go. It goes through the company and it goes through a number of steps. And there's always a chance for errors and drops and mistakes along the way that inhibits that customer from getting the product right away. So what I do and others, we come in and clean up those steps and reduce some of them, get rid of some of them, improve some of them so that it's straight through processing. Okay. Self-managed teams, in the book I wrote, I call it straight through thinking, which is this. Self-managed teams don't have all that clutter, don't have that going off in directions. They get together and assess a problem or a new product. Then they move to a decision process through brainstorming. Then they get the best idea and they act on it and they deliver it and get results. And then they have project debriefing where they grow on it. And then they repeat the process, assess a project, decide on it, act on it, deliver the results, grow from it, back and forth, assess, decide. It's just an endless positive circle. And it's called straight through thinking because it is in the self-managed team, not necessarily in a single individual, which is the leader. Okay, now let's talk. We talked about minimum requirements of influential leaders. Let's talk about minimum requirements of self-managed teams. First, the self-managed team has to believe deeply in the mission, vision, and guiding principles of the company. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands or anything, but I'll bet the employees I talk to from border to border and coast to coast, I'll ask them, hey, have you read the company's mission, vision, and guiding principles? And they'll say, yeah. When? The day I was hired. But then I got busy. So it sat there for 12 years. Not with a self-managed team. A self-managed team, their DNA is the mission, vision, and guiding principles of that company. They believe deeply. They are company people. So that's one minimum requirement. The second one, you got to have proxy leaders within that team already. Let's say we've got a team of 10. Hopefully you've got one or two in that team that when you're away for a little bit, the other 8 or 9 kind of migrate to that person. I know some of you out there have those teams and maybe you're one of those people. That's what I call proxy leaders. You need those on the team because that's going to help seed, S-E-E-D, help seed these self-managed principles to them. And then the third one, establish a relationship and a connection with team members, not you. I mean, you need to do that, but now we're talking about each other on that team. Each other on that team has to form a deep relationship and a connection. Doesn't mean they have to love each other, but they need to understand and know each other, know what makes them tick. Believe me, in the military, that series called Band of Brothers, you bet. Your team needs to function like a well-oiled machine because in the military, the problem you incur, you're either captured or killed. Okay. Now, true, that doesn't necessarily happen in business, although I've had some days like that. Though your team has to form a bond among themselves so that when they are on a project and they hit a speed bump, pothole, or a wall, the rats aren't leaving the ship. They're staying there and bonded together to get through that. Okay. Now, let's talk about some key attributes of self-managed team. The first one is passion. If that team doesn't have the passion to be not only self-managed, but believe in that mission, vision, and guiding principles, don't even begin. Next, shared learning. That team needs to share learning. If 2 of them go out and learn new principles, those 2 got to come back and dispense it to the other 8. If somebody discovers something new, they don't hold it in because they want to march up the corporate ladder. They share it. All right. The next one, solve problems. They have a passionate, shared learning, understanding how to solve problems, not fix issues. There's a big difference between fixing issues and solving problems. Fixing issues is like kicking the can down the road. It's still going to be around. Okay. You just lessened it. I want teams that solve problems and move on to the next one. And self-managed teams do that. Change is growth. I've got a whole workshop, actually multiple day workshop, on how I'm going to change this country's thinking from change management to growth management, because that's what change is. Change has such a negative connotation out there. Lost jobs, changing jobs, irritation, whatever. It's not. When a company makes a change, it's usually to grow. And a self-managed team understands that when they're asked to change something, they're probably going to acquire new tools along the way, new training along the way, which is growth. And then the last one is adapt, cope, focus, and finish. Self-managed teams know how to adapt to changing conditions, cope with things they can't change, but always, always, always focus and finish the task. Focus and finish the task. Okay? Now, what about the company? Okay, because I've been talking about influential leaders and I've been talking about the team members. They work for the company. The company has to support this too. Here's just 3 or 4 attributes of a company's participation. First of all, that company has to have a strong organizational learning bias. That's why I love ATD so much, because they are, hopefully you're all instilling in your companies a learning bias. What I mean by organizational, from the CEO down to the 22-year-older you just hired right out of college, everybody is learning all the time, okay? The next 2, change the organizational structure and change the organizational culture. If you don't have influential leaders now and self-managed teams, believe me, when you bring somebody like me in or somebody else in, we're going to look at the structure and we're going to look at the culture and we're going to recommend, and in my book, I recommend rather vociferously, you're going to have to change your structure and you're going to have to change that culture that supports that structure, because this is big time. And then assess management and employee behavior. That gets back to a little bit of that protectionism to learning. Myers-Briggs, Clifton Strength Finders, DISC. I really love DISC. I do that for a lot of companies. DISC, you need to start understanding your people, and your people need to start understanding your management. And you get that by having behavioral or personality assessments and then distributing all that so that everybody knows each other. Because just like in the military, if I'm in a foxhole in a firefight and I'm shooting north, I want to know the personality of my buddy that's protecting my back shooting south. Was he into poetry in high school or hunting and fishing? I know my mama wants him to be in hunting and fishing. And it's the same way. I got to know the personality. The same way with companies. When the bullets start flying on a project, when the wheels start wobbling, things aren't going straight, you better know what that other person is on that team and how you're going to act or react when that project starts to head south. And the company can help that through behavioral assessments, okay? Now, we're starting to wrap this up. Points of failure. I'm a pragmatist, okay? I don't have a bottle of elixir that for $1 is going to cure all your problems tomorrow at 8:30. There's going to be some patience that you're going to need along the way. And there's potentially going to be some points of failure that I want you to think about and consider. Here are 4. Number 1, a lack of understanding. It gets back to what I said there. Influential leaders need to understand their role. They need to understand their new role, okay? And so do the employees in regards to a self-managed team. No formal structure to begin with. I know this sounds rather naive, but you would be surprised at the number of companies over the last 8 years that I've walked in the front door. And they're successful, but they're successful because of 2 things: heroic effort by the part of employees and luck, because they have very little formal structure. And usually what I tell them is, okay, first we're going to work possibly for months and put a formal structure in before we layer on influential leadership and self-managed teams. So that's another point of failure. Don't just go plunging into this unless you understand that you've got a good, strong structure there. Lack of management commitment. That gets back to when I come into a company and I've got managers that are fearful for their job because I might work them out of a job. I've got to explain to them that I'm not there to work them out of a job. I'm actually here to enhance their role. But a lot of times you will get leaders and managers that want to drag their feet on this because they think they're going to work themselves out of a job. And then the last one, destructive internal competitiveness. This gets back to the sharing or not sharing. Your employees, whether it's a 22-year-older or a well-seasoned 15-year veteran, everybody needs to share everything. I can't tell you the number of times I come into a company and 15-year veterans on a team will treat the rookies on the team as if they're a pariah. Because, well, how dare Russ hire a 22-year-old right out of college? I know everything because I'm 15-year veteran here. That 22-year-older just graduated, probably spent $80, $90, $100,000 on their college education. They now have new things in their mind. They have current education. That 15-year veteran ought to understand that when you combine new stuff with the experienced stuff, man, you got a heck of a team. So you got to break down that destructive internal competitiveness. Now, let's end this by talking about the positive. Points of success. What are some points of success when you actually develop a self-managed team? Number one, as I've said 4 or 5 times, the leader's role will increase in value and impact. Now you as the leader and manager will have more time to sit at the executive table. You'll have more time to think innovatively and creatively. You'll have more time to get your head out of the details and look downstream for possible new opportunities or problems coming at you. Breeding ground for innovation. If you're going to move some innovation responsibility to your team, now you've got 10 people thinking outside the box instead of just you. Oh man. Draw high quality applicants. Okay, I'll use Union Pacific again, or Omaha World Herald, or Lincoln Journal, or whatever. If those companies are known far and wide as wanting influential leaders and wanting self-managed teams, that company becomes a magnet for high quality applicants when you need to fill roles. It's a big deal. Unlimited leadership development. In this self-managed team, you're going to have 2 people that are focused on their careers. You're going to have some of those, and let's use that team of 10 again. You're going to have some on those 10 that really want to work their way up the ladder, be promoted. Self-managed team is a breeding ground for that. Because again, I'm giving them more and more responsibility that I had. The second type of person that you're going to have on that team is the person that wants to learn leadership skills, but not to be a leader, just to be better in that team. Guess what happens to that team? They get better and better and better. I've already mentioned purpose and significance. Purpose and significance become driving forces for that self-managed team. It becomes a juggernaut. Myron, get out of the way. And then learning, developing, challenging, and growing. Learning, developing, challenging, and growing. My God, how can an employee not get behind that if a company has a bias towards learning, developing, challenging, and growing? Not mandates, edicts, orders, screw the work-life balance, work nights, give up weekends. This is big time. I want to leave you with some final thoughts. Okay. Legacy. Oh my God, you young people out there are saying right now, legacy. God, no wonder he's old. I haven't got time to think of when I retire. I'm building my career now. I haven't got time. I'm going to tune Russ out. This legacy is just this old fogey stuff. Meatloaf on Wednesday and shuffleboard on Sundays. You people, I tell you what, you better start thinking about your legacy now. Okay, why? We used to, at Emeritus, where I was at, we have Retirees Day, where we allow retirees to come back for a free lunch so that we can mix with them again, because we were such good friends with them. When the people that are there see the retirees cross the cafeteria floor with that tray of food, there's one of 2 comments that are said about those retirees. The first comment is usually this: geez, I'm glad that guy's gone. God, what a mess he left. And the second kind of comment, wow, I wish we had 10 of her left. She was magnificent. So what you need to start thinking right now, whether you're 22, 32, or 42, you need to decide, what are you going to leave the company when you leave the company? What are you going to leave the company when you leave the company? Are you going to leave a mess? Or are you going to leave something that's people for years say, this company's here because of her? That's why you need to start thinking about your legacy now, because you have to constantly, on a day-to-day basis, think, I'm building futures for myself and others to follow. I'm building futures for myself and others to follow. And you do that by being influential leaders if you're in a leadership role, or being an active member of a self-managed team. Okay? But above all, The last thing I'll leave you, every day you come into work, always come in with this thought: what's next? What's next? Let's rock. Okay, Angie, we made it.
Russ, that was wonderful. And I don't know how you might have had your monitors set up during that time, but I greatly appreciated being able to see people taking notes as we went through. They were smiling, showing that they were engaged, and we were laughing with you about some things. And maybe the number one point that seemed to resonate with like every head tipping to write down was your point about the people sitting around the puzzle table. What do you think? Like, that is such a transformative statement. So before we go on to questions, I just want to say thank you. And maybe if you don't mind, if we could stop the screen. Well, it's up to you. I know there was a question on slide 14 posed by Patty, and she was asking, what would you say is a strong organizational structure for this type of initiative? So can you give some examples of what that would look like? So it's up to you. If you want to keep your slide deck up, that's great. But if you want to allow more of a conversational space, then we could stop the screen share and let people kind of just talk together in our little room here.
Yeah, that's fine. You want me to stop sharing? That's fine.
Sure, sure.
Okay, there we go. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
And when I do live, I'm across the stage, I'm up and down the aisles, and I haven't been able to do that. So if you don't mind, I'd like to bust a move for about 5 minutes.
I think you have people joining you here.
Okay, let's talk about that structure, because that is a pretty big swallow. Okay, when I go into a large company, for example, and say, you need to change your structure, they go, yeah, okay, we'll move the restrooms from the south side to the north side, but that's all. Changing the structure. Actually, to tell you the truth, what I look for is structure with fluidity. Structure with fluidity. I'm working with a company right now that said, hey, Russ, we have no culture. Come out and help us build a culture. I said, every company has a culture. Every company has a culture. And every company has a structure. It just depends on what you want to do. With a self-managed team, what I usually look for or talk to them about in terms of structure is, when I say fluidity, is there great opportunity for mobility among employees? Can people transfer from one team and even one division freely based on their skill sets? I mean, they can't just bop around, but if they do have it, can they move within it? That's why I call it structure with fluidity. All right, because self-managed teams, when you develop a self-managed team, you're going to create some hot dogs. If you thought you had some A+ players before, a self-managed team will cause those A+ players to be double A+. Okay, well, they may look around that division or that team they're on, and they may say, you know what, this is a big company, I want to be over there, or I want to be over there. So the company needs to have a structure so that people that want to work 20 years in the print shop or whatever can, but that management allows and the culture allows for fluidity, for movement around there. All right. The second thing in terms of a structure is, again, fluidity. You can have structure, but can you, I went through a couple of mergers and many acquisitions. Acquisitions are not necessarily mergers between two companies. It's when we buy another part of the business of a company. But the structure, the company needs to have structure and needs to understand it completely, because when you do go through a big change or a merger, you may have to just like a puzzle, move those pieces around. You need to have an overarching structure so that those pieces of puzzle don't fall off the table. Now, I know I'm kind of boiling the ocean in 2 or 3 minutes on this, when it really takes, days of sitting with people and talking about structure. But I bet the way I can sum it up is by saying you need to have structure, but it needs to have some fluidity. Okay. Does that make sense, Angie? Or
Yeah, so have all your pieces accounted for, and understand how they fit together to make the best possible puzzle, but give every puzzle piece its equal weight to excel and be interchangeable, maybe?
yes. Now, one last thing I'll say on structure, HR. HR, HR. I gave a keynote speech a couple of years ago to about 113 SHARM, Society of Human Resource Management people. And they said, hey, Russ, what do businesses expect out of HR in the 21st century? And I said, HR needs to be the most important department in a company. More important than sales, even though they ring the cash register, more important than marketing, or what? Why? Because I've been in companies, if you want to talk about structure or no structure, I've had companies that each department gets their own budget. Well, guess what? Sales and marketing gets this much budget. IT gets this much budget. Guess who gets the great leadership training? Marketing. Guess who gets strangled? IT. What I want is I want to have HR in charge of those things because they're sort of the hub of which all of the departments are spokes. The HR department then is responsible for levelizing out budget dollars on these critical things called learning, developing, and teaching. Because if you don't do that, and I have personal experience on this, I was the receiver of it. My leadership style, let's see if I should keep going. The company I used to work for that will remain nameless, I was a pretty good people person leader. I had a lot of people transition to my team from other leaders that were not of my leadership style. Why? Because we had different consultants, different teachings, et cetera, on leadership. We had leadership style all over the place. That's where HR comes in and adds some structure to consistent leadership training so that you don't get these people leaving one, average leader and going to another department that has a great influential leader. So hope that makes sense too. So anyway.
Thank you so much. Well, we have just about 3 minutes left. What other questions might you be curious to ask Russ? I know when we did our run through, I was able to ask a question about conflict management, and I don't want to derail any questions that you may have, but his responses were so fascinating and filled with a wealth of backstory and knowledge. I want to give you that opportunity. What would you like to ask, if anything? And you can just go ahead and unmute. You don't even have to type it or anything. All right. Well, nobody's making a move, but from just to wrap up in the final 2 minutes here, Russ, I had asked you during the run through that we did about when you bring a team together for that first time and you're going through that storming phase and you have people, I love what you called them, the names that you gave them. Do you remember what you said? So when you have people that come together and my struggle was, you bring cross-departmental people together, they have to work, and then they just are like, this isn't going to work. You can't do this. We won't do this. How do you rebrand that and help everybody understand that, yes, not only are we going to do that, but we need your help to do it? And what did you say? Do you remember what you called them?
I had
2 names.
Right, but I had 2 levels on those names. I had the appropriate name I gave them, and then I had the Russ Genzmer on his Harley motorcycle, a name for them, believe me. Okay, when you have that conflict in that storming stage, when you have people that are just not, when they come in your front door as a leader and manager, say, I can't I can't deal with Lisa, I can't deal with Angie, because we all probably can't. Okay, no. Angie, you are a real prize from a standpoint of just we had an instant relationship right away. That was great. Okay, when people are conflicting with either each other or with you, there's 2 types of people out there: the yeah but Yolindas and the negative Neds. I mean, have you ever been in those meetings where, the influential leader goes, hey, we got a great problem to solve, so let's throw some ideas out. What about this? Yeah, but that didn't work last year. Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but that's not going to work there. And then you've got the negative Neds. Nope. Okay, I have one tip that has never failed me, okay, down through the years. When you have conflict, generally they are dealing in anecdotes and emotion. Psychologists have said that for years. In most cases, when people lose their cool, they are dealing in anecdotes and emotion. How do you get them to calm down? Facts and figures, facts and figures, facts and figures. Okay, Linda, you said you disagree with this point. Tell me specifically on a point-by-point basis, why you disagree. Psychologists have said that a lot of times they'll run out of gas. They'll go, yeah, but this, and then all of a sudden, no, we're going to do that. Check that. We're going to do that. Check that. We're going to do that. And pretty soon the yeah, but Yolindas go back to the third row, and the negative Neds already are sitting back there going, I'm not going to ask that of Genzmer. So facts and figures, whenever anybody loses their emotion, even I'm not a marriage counselor, but in a marriage, when you're sitting there arguing with each other, I guarantee you, in most cases, one of you is dealing in highly emotional anecdotes and emotion. All the other spouse needs to do is just say, hey, now, wait a minute. Now, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And a lot of times, facts and figures will get people to calm down. One last thing, and I know we're running late here. One last thing. Never, ever, ever use the words calm down. Not from this day forth. For this reason, psychology, and I support this, it has a 100% failure rate. Now, you may think, oh, I've said calm down to Bob before, and he's kind of sat in his chair and, yeah, you're right. They're just fooling you. They're not calmed down. There's still a fire here. Never say calm down, because psychologists say that usually when people get charged up, they got sweat equity into this point. You actually demean them by saying, just calm down. Here's how to calm down. Facts and figures, facts and figures. Ray. Okay. Specifically, give me 5 points on that issue that's causing you so much concern. Don't say calm down. Okay.
Wonderful advice. Thank you, Russ. I love that Chris commented. She said, Russ, can you call my husband and tell him
no,
the calm down doesn't work?
Mama Genzmer didn't raise no fool, okay?
I love it. Well, I'm sorry we ran over. I hope the session was of value to you. We'll be sharing the recording afterwards. And it's just so great to see all of your faces. Thank you for making time. Thank you for joining us. And then on behalf of ATD Nebraska and all of our membership, Russ, we just want to say thank you to you for blessing us today with your words of wisdom, your enthusiasm. It's so clear that you're passionate about this topic, and we are all better for having been able to learn through the lens of your experience. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks,
Bye-bye,
everybody. Bye-bye. All right. 2 thumbs way up. You did a great job today.
Thank you.
You are
Angie.
so engaging. You just have such a natural presence, and I'm going to stop the recording. I don't need to catch that. Sorry.